baby trees.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Close enough.
The Black Pondo Podcast.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Bonsai.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Bonsai.
Yeah.
The Black Pondo Podcast.
One thing I think I've realized is I have tried to buy some really nice deciduous bonsai trunks. And I think that part of it is I really appreciate the journey of creating a nice bonsai.
Mhm.
And I think what I've realized is that I'm really excited to develop some really nice trees with you as my teacher, because I think that the potential is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm just really excited to grow some really nice deciduous bonsai with you. And I think that the technique that you've been teaching me has been just ridiculous. And so it's been incredibly fun, and I think I'm more open to buying really nice trunks as opposed to like finished deciduous trees.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'm excited for the journey with you, and it's gonna be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's great developing deciduous trees. I mean, I have a real good time developing them. Yeah. Once you kind of know the steps and you kind of get a basic idea of the time frame and growing the tree well. Yeah. At first, it always seems slow, and then it starts kind of picking up the pace. And before you know it, a good amount of time has passed, and you see old pictures versus new pictures, and you're like, wow, it's coming together. Which is always a little tricky to sell people on, right? Just the concept of developing bonsai takes so long that a lot of people do have to kind of trust you and what you tell them, because the result is not instant at all. It's not even it's not even quick, like within a 5-year period a lot of times, right? Whereas other trees, you might get more result in a 5-year period, right? A lot of junipers, if the branches are usable, you can get some results fairly quickly. If they're not usable, then maybe not so quickly, right? uh, but deciduous trees, yeah, it can be yeah, it's very rewarding, but it also does kind of require you to kind of have faith in the process, and again, it tests it really does test your patience, right? But I think you've already seen what can happen, right? You're experienced enough that you know this is the process, and then you're ready to go, right? Uh, I'm referencing more like newer people who I work with for the first time, and telling them about this process. Now it does help having material to show people, right? Oh, this is what it looked like before, and this is what we did, and so forth. That's a little bit more helpful. But sometimes we don't always have that, and and yeah, there's a lot of trust in.
Yeah.
So,
For
I guess that's all I can say.
Yes. Well,
But very rewarding once you see it actually happen. It's pretty cool.
yeah. 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 One thing I enjoy, I heard Andrew Robson say,
Hmm.
he uses the analogy that building deciduous bonsai is like putting money in your 401k.
Yeah.
It's maybe like not, and I'm not trying to speak for Andrew Robson, but
Yeah.
he basically something along the lines of like, it's not like all that flashy and like a get rich quick scheme, but the way I think about it at least is like it's gonna make you money. It's just like a slow and steady.
Yeah. It's
Takes
a
time.
long-term investment kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy for it. And technically, you can apply that to every tree you work on in bonsai. Is that every tree you work on, no matter what kind of tree it is, juniper, Japanese maple, trident maple, deciduous trees, right? Black pines. Technically, if you treat it all like they were 401ks, the quality of the tree would be significantly better. I think what skews it on the conifer side, mainly junipers, because people don't do this with black pines, right? They tend to do it more on junipers. It gets a little skewed because we see so-called results within 5 years on the juniper, but it's not really any kind of real substance in that kind of design a lot of times. That's also why you see junipers as demo material all the time, right? It's because you can manipulate the branches and make something that looks like something, but the substance is still not there. Uh, so sometimes people will say they're kind of two different kind of trees to work on. What I'm saying is that they're really the same. All the great trees take a long time to develop, regardless of what kind of tree they are. Uh, it's just that you can't, like, deciduous trees will stop you in saying, "Well, this branch is thick. You can't just bend it." Right, it would just break off. So you have to grow it. It's
For
just like,
sure.
"Okay, I have to bend to your will, I can't bend you," right? Because you just break. But on a juniper, you can whip it around, good or bad, right? There's good bending and there's bad bending, unnecessary bending, to yield some kind of a product that is sold as really good when in fact, it's too young. It's again, there's no substance to it, right? Um it seems like you're trying to get the reward with no real effort. It seems like there's effort, but not real effort. Uh, but I do like that analogy. Yeah, you got to think of it as it's a marathon,
Yeah,
right? As I say, it's never that quick 100-meter dash.
yeah,
If you think it is, you're really not developing anything of quality. It's just not going to happen.
for
Right?
sure.
It's not. That's just not how it works. Right.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I think the question that I want to ask you, and I think this is just such a complex question, and the reason I'm asking is because I think it leads to a lot of good conversation, is essentially if I take a tree to you and it's a tree that someone has developed, so a nice or who knows, like it's a I don't know, anywhere from a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10 to like a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
My question is, should we start this tree over, start the branches over, or should we keep it as is? Like, how do you decide that? But
Um,
I think to before maybe we get into that, maybe we talk about what even is a good deciduous bonsai in your mind.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
okay?
yeah. Oh, and I mean that in itself is a tricky question, right? What is considered a good deciduous tree or a good style deciduous tree? I mean, a big part of it is going to inevitably come down to, yeah, what we all think or even what we individually think of as a high quality bonsai. Because there's so many different styles. You can go um, the Japanese route, and pick off a lot of things that they like to see in deciduous trees or certain types of deciduous trees and say, okay, that's what I believe in, that's what I like, so that's what I'm going to do. But if that's not what you're going for, then that's not what you're going for, right? You don't want to apply a bunch of Japanese aesthetics if you don't like it, right? What are the aesthetics that you like, or what is it that you want to see, right? And then you kind of go from there. So generally, when I work with people, I tend to I'm kind of a mix, right? I mean, I like Japanese aesthetics, but I like Western aesthetics too, right? And those are very broad statements too, right? Um, so we're all somewhere there, right? I think we all get into bonsai because there's something about eh, let's just say Japanese aesthetics that we like, maybe parts of it that we like, and that's how we got into bonsai. And then now we're doing bonsai. Maybe we preserve elements of that, but then we try to add other types of aesthetics that we like based on our own culture, right? So so say you bring a tree to me and it's at a certain whatever its stage is at. I mean, a couple of things I'll look at is I try to get an understanding of what is it that you want the tree to look like. what kind of aesthetics that you like. It doesn't have to be what aesthetics I like. Now, I could say, well, I'm focusing on Japanese aesthetics only, and if you don't do it my way, you should probably find somebody else, right? That's not a rejection of your aesthetic. It's just, well, I like doing it this way, and that's what I teach, right? Let's say, and then you want something different. Maybe I don't know anything about that. I don't feel qualified to help you with that, whatever the reason is, and then we part ways, right? Usually, if my client is trying to come up with something different, I do cater to that and understand and just get an idea what is it that they're trying to do. Now, sometimes it really is that they like Japanese aesthetics. They just don't understand it very well. So they come up with ideas that doesn't fit what they actually like. So there's some figuring out of that too. But for the most part, just kind of a big picture answer stuff. If the tree is, say, semi-developed, usually one of the few and I learned this when I was in Japan actually, is that a big part of bonsai is age, and age is king. No matter if the tree is developed in any style that I like or maybe not like as much, if it's developed in a certain style and it's been that way for a very long time, I will tend to continue going with it and then finishing that project instead of restarting it. Okay. Unless you just say, you know what, I want to change it. Then I'll be okay. Then we'll change it, of course. But I do tend to say, okay, because this branch is 50 years old, when trees get to a certain age or when branches get to a certain age, they have a characteristic that shows that age that is not easily replaceable, right? You can maybe make a branch look older, but it's hard to make a branch look physically 50 years old or 100 years old or 200 years old. It's hard. It's not just simple manipulate. Oh, I bend the branch down. Nah, that doesn't quite. It feels older, but it's not like you just made it 300 years older either, right? There's a certain look that these old branches really have, and so at that point you start saying, yeah, we have these guidelines for how to develop a certain type of bonsai. We have certain aesthetics that we like, but you know what? This tree or this branch is so old. It's just not practical to do that. There's something more to it than just a bunch of technique now. It's just kind of like we just got to roll with it at this point. There's this it almost becomes how dare we think we're so superior to something that's so old that we just manipulate it, right? It's like, okay, let's have a little respect, right? And it is what it is at this point. Now, where's that cutoff? That's the question I always ask myself, right? Well, if it's a 20-year-old branch, then we're kind of like, well, it's a perspective thing too, right? Some people will be like, well, 20 years old, that's really old. Yeah, to a 20-year-old, it's like, okay, that's great, right? It seems like, yeah, it's my whole lifetime, right? But to a 60-year-old, you're like, you're just some young punk. Right? Let's chop this branch out. We can grow another 20-year-old branch, no problem, right? I'm experienced. I've been around, right? So it's so you get a branch that's 20 years old, and you say, well, okay, we can replace it. It's young, relatively young. But if it's a branch that's 100 years old, and you're kind of like, well, that's not that easy. It's like the 100th kokofu again.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Well, it's that doesn't come around very often, right? 20 years comes around 5 times, right? 100 years old is once. So that is a big factor for me, is that if it does show a lot of really a lot of age into it, then I'll try to go with it.
Okay.
How do we come up with a style that highlights maybe what we might consider not ideal? Oh, it does require you to then, yeah, kind of look at it a little different. Generally, I would say, yeah, if the branchers is just kind of young, we're not really lose anything by starting. We can only gain. then yeah, let's go ahead and restart. I mean, but I really do try to get an idea of okay, what the client likes, wants. Now, if it was my tree, then I would just think, okay, what is it that I want to see in this tree? Um, is there anything about this tree that is very unique that I shouldn't overlook? And most of the time, that's attached to age. Do I need to come up with a style that caters to that a little bit more instead of me just imposing my will on some young tree? Some young tree, okay, we tend to do that. It's not a big loss for anybody, really, even for the tree, right? It's I'll grow a new branch, no problem. I'm young, right? I do this for a living, right? An old branch is like it took a while, right? It took a long time. We don't just do this every day.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, and so that's why when I was saying earlier about age is an important factor for me. Looking in the tree, that would be one of the first things I look at. Sometimes, are there cases where yeah, the old branch just has to go, it just doesn't work for anything. Sure, that happens,
Yeah.
but I try not to jump to that. Right, that's too much of a loss too quickly to just chop off 100-year-old branch. Uh, Now, having said that, if it's a style that we come up with that caters to this really old branch, and we just have to kind of see the beauty in that. If it's a style that maybe we just don't like, maybe it's a tree that you decide, okay, it's not a tree for you. Instead of trying to hack it up, right, and force some kind of new style on it. But it does raise a interesting question on where is that number, right? It's like, is it 50 years old? Is it 40? It's gonna be different for each type of tree, right? It's might be easier if it's a black pine where, oh, well, this 80-year-old branch has 80-year-old bark.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe we shouldn't chop it off, right? But if it's a 5-year-old branch, 10-year-old branch, no bark, okay, well, we can maybe, all right, it's not that old. And then now you're okay changing it a bunch. Uh, yeah, tricky question. I would say yeah, age has a big part of it. Uh, what other things would be a big part? Yeah, maybe time frame. Yeah, just like thinking about potential of your trees or collection. How long will it take if we decide to chop all the branches out? Is it realistic? Is this something you want to see through in your lifetime? If not, then we can go a certain route. If you want to see it through in your lifetime, then it might not be worth it. Now, someone has to be able to tell you, or you have enough experience to know that oh, this is a 20-year project, or is it a 5-year project? Or is it an 80-year project, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't think any of us are thinking like, okay, I'll restart the branches and I'll somehow develop a deciduous tree that can rival deciduous trees that are in Kokufu in Japan, because those are multi-generational. But we are realistic that, okay, well, if I put 20, 25 years into this tree, it'll look pretty damn decent. And then hopefully the next person will keep working it. And it does then become like those cocoa food trees that took 3 generations to make, right? It's just a time thing, right? Someone just kept carrying it on. We just don't have that time frame yet. We will at some point. It's only a matter of time.
Hmm.
We're just not there yet. But we can at least be satisfied that, we in the 20, 25 years or however long we decide to spend on the tree, we we played that part. We were that first generation. Hopefully, the second generation then does it, and so forth. And it will be matched, right, at some point.
Yeah. So fantastic. So one of the main takeaways that I'm getting here is age is very important. And sometimes with great age, we're going to get some quirky, interesting, different things going on,
Yeah,
which might
yeah,
not fit the guidelines, but we're going to accept it because of the age.
yeah. It's kind of like this little asterisk, right? It's like yes, but
Got it.
uh, yeah, and I often tell my clients that yeah, age can forgive a lot on a bonsai,
That makes sense.
right?
Perfect. So let's put age aside for a second. what other things are you looking for in high quality deciduous? Like, let's start at the basics. Actually, I'll just give you one.
Okay.
Why don't we talk about taper?
Okay. Yeah.
So for me, taper is very important in deciduous. Maybe, with and I may put an asterisk by great age.
Yeah.
However, generally speaking, I guess for you, is taper important? And if so, why would taper be important in good deciduous? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, a taper is important in the sense that if you're trying to make some miniature version of some big tree or big old tree, is that these old trees will have taper. So it makes sense that your small size tree that's supposed to look old should have some kind of taper that's proportioned to that. Now, when you get into stylings of naturalistic styles versus a bit more abstract type styling, say kind of like those sumo trunks, which has like really fast taper, and there's nothing naturalistic about it, of course, right? It's a abstract version of naturalistic characteristics that we see in trees. It's just an extreme version of it, and it kind of has its own kind of style. Now, for me, partly, I do like deciduous trees that say have really large trunks. It's not. Uh, I mean, it can give you a sense of strength. It can give you a sense of age because the tree is so wide. Because trees that are really wide tends to be older, right?
Yeah.
Usually, skinny trees are not the old trees. Yeah, that's not always the case, but usually when we see a tree that's really wide, the assumption is that it's probably older.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so so again, that age thing, right, pops up. Uh, also, just seeing deciduous trees that have, say, larger trunks or more extreme kind of trunks, it's kind of fun because it's just a little less common, right? It's much easier to grow trees that have subtle taper that's skinny.
Yeah, it's hard to grow a big fat
Yeah,
trunk.
it requires a lot of skill, technique, timing. They don't all work out, right? So there's some skill in growing. I can't even say it's an artistic thing. It's just a technical thing. It takes a bit more time. It's kind of fun because it's a little rarer. You don't see it as often. It's kind of cool to have. We can all go to the nursery and find skinny trident maples or Japanese maples. We can find out all day. Doesn't mean that they're not worth something, but when you have thousands of them, hundreds of thousands, millions of them, they're not that interesting anymore, right? So we tend to gravitate towards things that are different. Do I have trees that are skinny and there's something about it that I like? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, so sometimes I might default to like the bigger trunks with more extreme taper just because it's just not as common. And it does tend to give you this sense of, wow, this tree must just be really old because look how big it is, right? For its height, how wide the trunk is, even though we go in knowing it's a distorted view of that, right? There's nothing naturalistic about it, right? It's kind of a fun thing, I think. So, but having some kind of normal taper, I think it is important, though. I've seen some really great trees that don't have taper,
Hmm.
but the styling tends to be a little different and it's kind of a one-off thing. It's not a common thing. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work at all. Right? That's a risk you take when you get into something like that. And then there are just styles that people tend to like, that people gravitate towards, right? When they look at deciduous trees, they like seeing semi-naturalistic characteristics of deciduous trees. Um, and that's just kind of the style that's more accepted, right? And that happens with every tree, really. You get a ginkgo tree, at least in Japan, they really style it like one way, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of this flame kind of style. They don't try to make it look like anything else. Whereas other trees, we do make it look, and somehow that's accepted, but on ginkgo, it's just not.
Yeah. It
It's
does
just a
seem like with
preference.
ginkgo, that's the way that they want to naturally grow.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a
So it's a very naturalistic
naturalistic
thing.
thing.
Yeah, there are some trunks that are bigger, but it's not that ridiculous. It still looks very similar to what a naturalistic one does. And so for those trees, there's not a lot of variations, right? But having said that, because there's not a lot of variation, is probably why they're not as popular. Also, like you see enough of the same kind of style trunks, and you're kind of like, okay, they're great. But we've seen so many, it's not that interesting anymore, right? Whereas some of the harder to come by type trunks are staying more interesting. And then there's some where, yeah, we've seen those a million times, but we just love it. We love looking at it all day long. It doesn't matter if it's the same for 100 trees. We like all of them, right? And that's just a human thing. What causes that? That's a complex question, but it happens.
Yeah. What does good taper look like throughout the tree?
Mm, I mean, I try to show not so much the exact taper change from one branch to the other, but a general consistent change of big to small.
And so, yeah, big to medium to small.
Yeah. If, say, the rate of change on one section to the next, you see, say, it's shrinking by 50%, whatever the number is, right? It does make sense to me that you would see that same reduction on the next branches and so forth, some consistency in that. There's going to be slight variations, right? But some relatively close to each other seems to work out. Oh, but does every single branch have to show that? I'd say no. If you tried to do that, I mean, that's like the impossible task too, right? You may never develop a tree because you're trying to make every branch look perfect. But I think generally, at least for the trees that I'm working with, I try to show that generally we're looking at it and we're seeing that. Is it every branch? Highly unlikely. But is it a good number of the branches? Yes.
Got it.
Right. So you get the sense that you're seeing this taper change. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. For sure, it doesn't have to be perfect. 'Cause trying to make it perfect, you just never finish your tree.
Yes.
You always be fixing something. Something's not happy. You're not happy with something.
Yeah. And so, generally speaking, closer to the trunk when we're talking about branches, we want the closest section to the trunk to be the thickest, and then gradually get thinner and thinner and thinner and finer
Yeah.
until you're on the tips, right?
Yeah, yeah. If we're looking for like a number, right? I would say that a number to go off. Not again, you can't go off it exactly. If it's a squatty tree where the taper is fast, you're every from the trunk to the main branch to the secondary branches off that, or the secondary branches off of the trunk. You're looking at wherever the branch is coming off of the trunk or wherever the secondary branch is coming off of the primary branch. If it's fast taper, at about 50% gives you that fast taper. So like if your trunk, and this doesn't always work out, right? But again, this is just generalization. If uh if you have a trunk and the branch comes out, it's like a 50% reduction each time.
Mm.
That taper is very fast,
Okay.
right? But that only works for certain styles. If you want something a little bit softer, that reduction tends to be more like 25, 30%. So it's a little longer and a slower reduction. So it's a little softer feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So you can potentially use that as a semi guideline to kind of give you at least a start on kind of just trying things out. Okay, at least I have a number I can go with, and let's see where we can go with this, right? If people are looking for that number, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So somewhere between that 25 to 50%. Once you get past 50%, the the branch off of the main branch will start looking like a secondary trunk now. And so it gets a little bit beyond. It might be too crazy, or it just looks different. It's not a taper thing anymore. So so yeah, if we were to assign a number, you can maybe assign those numbers to kind of get you started. But you'll get a sense of what is it you like, what kind of style you like, and you might find that, okay, this is my number based on this style that I tend to like. It's a softer or more aggressive taper change. Something that someone told me years ago about thinking about taper is that if you have if you're just starting with the trunk, if your trunk currently when you start off with, this not with just as bonsai, right? Not if you're growing and all that stuff. There's a certain amount of taper that starts at the base. If there's no taper at the base, then the tree is not tapering, right? If you see at the base it starts to taper, then you can kind of see a line. And this helps people when they're trying to figure out, well, how fast should the taper be? How tall, which will then change to, well, how tall the tree ends up being. Is that if you have a trunk that's a certain width and there's some taper in there, right at the base, and I know I'm illustrating this with my hand. I know people out there can't see this, but say wherever it starts from the ground level, you're touching the trunk with your hand, and there's a certain amount of taper. Your hands are kind of angled in. If you use that as your guide and you just follow that up, right? You just draw a line from that starting taper, wherever that line intersects, that kind of tells you where your trunk kind of ends. Doesn't mean that's exactly where the height of your tree is, but if you want consistent taper, say it's here. Once it crosses,
Okay.
and you can build the top on that, but that's about where the height of your tree is if you have consistent taper. And you can do that with the branches too, in a way. That's why if your trunk has no taper, then it never intersects, right? And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I got to do something about this. Uh, try to figure out how do I get some taper in this thing to get this whole thing started. Now, again, that's generally speaking, most trees, most of the deciduous trees we do tend to want to see some kind of taper. There are styles where there's no taper. Sure, it's just a funky style. Is that acceptable? Absolutely. It's not very common. And if we're talking again about just generalities, is that for your typical bonsai, taper is important. But there are some styles where it's not as important. But usually that then comes with the attachment of age.
Yeah.
The tree's just too old. It doesn't matter that it doesn't have taper anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a tree that doesn't have taper and you're willing to just roll with it, right? And just keep going and kind of roll the dice in a way, because it could turn out great or it could turn out really bad. Chances are it'll just turn out bad. Because the weird trees, it's never like, oh, just because you have a weird idea, it turns out great. There's a lot that fail, and then the few occasion where it does work out. So just prepare yourself. Don't expect that it's just going to work out. But sometimes you can have trees that have reverse taper or no taper. And because of just the overall aesthetic of the tree, the overall styling, the look of the tree, it just hits these key points that are just likable, right? We just like what we see.
Yeah. I feel like that's just like you mentioned, though, doesn't work out a lot. And that's more the rare side. And
Yeah.
that's more with great age.
Yeah. It becomes
Like if let's say I want to grow a tree from air layer,
yeah.
which I think a lot of the best deciduous seem to come from air layer, you would never say throw some reverse taper in there or
Yeah, usually we don't go out of our way to say let's go for it.
yeah.
It always ends up being something you stumble upon, right? Oh, this tree already has this. Do we try to change it or do we go with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I don't think anybody ever looked at a tree that had a reverse taper and said, "Yeah, let's go for it."
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry. As in, let's grow reverse taper and let's
Mhm.
make something different.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people don't do that. And I think the trees I'm referring to that say have reverse taper that are really important trees. And in this one case, I think it's a very old red pine. It does have reverse taper, but the tree is so old and the bark is so good.
Yeah.
It's so thick that we're like, are we really going to let taper kind of stop us from appreciating this old thing?
Yeah.
Okay, this is beyond what we're normally doing now. But that's the exception for this one tree.
Yeah.
It's not the norm either. So So you probably don't want your entire collection just hoping that you get something like that. Usually people you tend to stumble on that.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that's a good point.
For sure. So let's talk about kind of common maybe pitfalls in the United States that you see a lot when it comes to taper. I guess just a couple maybe that I feel like I see are one, not having really fine branching on the ends of the silhouette.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of times people have really thick, coarse branches, and maybe they don't even know that, hey, ooh, well, when you look at deciduous trees in the native environment, often there's really fine branching on a nice mature tree. And at the tips, it's all super fine.
Mhm.
And I feel like we don't see that a lot with American deciduous bonsai.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, part of it is just a technical thing, right? Are we working the tree in a way to develop those trees? Uh, Sometimes it's a misunderstanding of, how dense a tree should or can be. Because I do know that some people see a certain amount of branches and they'll say, "Oh, that's very dense," and then somebody else looks at it and say, "Well, that's not actually dense enough." So, what defines as dense enough or dense, right? I guess it really comes down to what someone ended up telling you was dense, right? Oh,
I think that's another common pitfall in the US, like
yeah,
not
yeah,
dense enough.
yeah.
Or
What is considered dense enough?
yeah,
Yeah, most of the time when I'm trying to create something that has a lot of density to it, in the development process, sometimes it's counterintuitive too, because in the early development, say when the tree is not full size or and I'm developing a certain amount of density, it seems excessive. And it is true. At the current state when it's in development, it is excessive. But that's for technical reasons. It's not because we actually want the tree to look like that. Because we know that when we're developing deciduous trees, branches come and go, right? Some branches make it. Even we don't expect all the branches to just make it on the deciduous. That just doesn't happen. So it's in part of the developing of the tree to the final silhouette, in a way, during that process, you do need the tree to have more branches than you really want at the end, because some don't make it, right? It's just during the process, it looks like it's super crowded for maybe a structure that seems very small. It's not the full size yet. But once you get it to the full size, it's actually not as crowded as you thought. Um, so again, that just comes down to a technical question. That's not question, a technical issue is the understanding of how to develop ramification, or at least just knowing that, oh, I can develop this much. Or even, oh, this is acceptable. I thought it was not. Right? Because everybody around me tells me, oh, it's too dense, it's too jammed up. And for some reason that's a bad thing. Right. And most of the time people say it's a bad thing because the tree may decline because it's too jammed up. Without realizing that, well, how full can you make it before that happens? Okay. And sometimes it's just an environmental thing too, right? Can we get trees as dense here as in another area? Now, the environment might be different enough that we can't, or we can. So that's something to think about. I don't tend to fall back on that, because you can just use that as a cop out. Oh, my weather doesn't allow me to get it as dense. Well, no, it might just be a skill thing.
yeah.
So, but say you really do, focus on trying to do the best you can, and it turns out, yeah, you know what? If it was more humid here in general, things usually grow better, and that's why I can get more ramification. And if you're in dry areas, it doesn't happen as well. Right. I mean, we've seen photos of like ficus that are developed in Indonesia. I mean, the ramification is crazy, right?
Yeah.
But the tree grows 24/7 all year round. It's the perfect weather for it. It's humid that they can do that. We try to do that, and the tree falls apart. It can't handle the work, right? So we can't get it that dense, and that's just the fact of life, right? That's just how it is. Uh, so So yeah, density or understanding what is density. That's something that we're overcoming now, but we can continue. But it's still early. Some of the other pitfalls, some of the basic things is water quality. Some people try to develop deciduous trees and have bad water, and they don't quite. Not that they're bad people or anything. They just don't quite understand how come it's not working out, not knowing that it's just bad water, right? Something so fundamental like that. Uh, so that's one of the early main pitfalls that people run into when they try to develop deciduous trees, that their water quality is not good. Maybe the second thing is, are the trees getting enough shade? Sometimes people can't provide the shade that the tree may need. My deciduous trees generally have to go with under 50% shade cloth because it gets to 100 degrees in the summer. No Japanese maple likes that, right? Or trident maples in the ground like it. They're fine with that, but in the pot, not so much. So there's that, giving it shade. Uh, Back to technical stuff, yeah, just working on them at the right time to get the tree to do what you need it to do. If in this case, okay, developing uh, density or more branches in the tree, or even things like growing main branches out to get that taper change, right? Setting it up to have certain sizes. Seeing taper change on the tree makes the tree look older. Right. It shows that this branch came first and this branch came next and this branch came after that and so forth. It's not, if all the branches are the same size, you're like, oh, it's a bush. Because that's what bushes do.
Yeah.
They'll kind of come at the same time. It's just this big ball, right? Uh, so, so yeah, I mean, if we're just starting, the easy stuff, let's say, yeah, good water, some shade, start thinking about, okay, what are the techniques that I don't know, or what are the techniques that I do know, and am I applying it at the correct time? Because the timing is very important. Um, then on top of that, trusting the process because it doesn't show itself year after year. It's like in like 3-year jumps that you see, oh, it's actually working, right? Common technical things. Okay, you wire a branch. Don't let the wire bite in and destroy the branch, right? Sometimes with the deciduous tree, if you're growing the branch out, you put the wire on there, and a month later, it's biting in. So you got to take it off. You can't just let it go for 6 months. Um, so it's a lot of that, and inevitably, it's once you get past the shade and the water quality stuff, it's just all really more technical stuff. And then once you get past the technical stuff of, okay, well, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do, you might then say, well, it's an environmental thing. We don't have the same environment that allows us to grow, say, a certain quality of tree, or we have the better environment. That's a possibility too. Usually, generally speaking, if you want to develop bonsai, if you're in more humid areas, you're just going to have more success.
Mm.
I mean, there's challenges still. You might get more fungus and all that stuff, but most trees grow better if there's humidity.
Got it.
And in California, for the most, we don't have warm humidity. We have cold humidity most of the time.
Yeah. Now, so that's some great falls. I'm curious about pitfalls regarding design. And so I guess one that I see is, and I'm curious how important this is to you, going back to taper a bit. I feel like taper should gradually go down. So, meaning, like, say, for example, in the trunk, the longest section of taper should be the closest to the surface roots or closest to the soil. And then after that, it should get slightly shorter and slightly shorter and slightly shorter.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this thing in the US where people have a tapering tree and it gets shorter, but then the apex they'll make like 3 times as long as it should be.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about, but that's like a recurring
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I mean, that's that's a technical issue, right? So I would say that, yeah, however you want the tree to taper, and say the rate of taper. Uh, Yeah, you can break it down to these numbers, right? And I would say, yeah, you can use that as kind of a guideline, right? Again, if you have a sense of that, then you're going to be okay. It doesn't have to be perfect because rarely will it ever be perfect. If it happens to be perfect, that's great. That's rare. I'll take it. But if as long as it gives you that sense, then I'd say, okay, that's great. We want to at least have that. What's happening in I think in the U.S. in this kind of weird lopsided taper that you're talking about, or maybe this lack of taper, is it seems very simple to me, right? Mainly because when I was in Japan, my teacher is like, was he third or fourth generation, and they started as tree growers for bonsai, right? And I've seen some of the trees they've grown in the ground and all that stuff, root over rocks, all that, and some of the techniques they use to get taper in the tree, right? It really does come down to if you ever see a Japanese maple that's imported from Japan, and let's say it's of decent quality, something you'll notice is that usually the taper is pretty good. And all it is that they're doing, the difference is that they're growing a trunk out. This is a little general. They're growing a trunk out, okay? It's going to be a certain size and it's not going to have taper because when you grow a tree out, it has no taper. It's just a pole and you're just trying to get some kind of size. It doesn't naturally grow taper on its own unless it's a full size tree, right? So you're growing this pole and all they're doing really is they're cutting low enough and picking a new branch to take over and not growing that branch as big as the original branch, which is the trunk. It's say a third smaller, let's just say, right? Let's just say that's our taper change. So you're growing this trunk, and let's put out some numbers, right? Let's say the trunk is 8 inches wide. They chop it fairly low, they pick a new leader, and they grow that 6 inches wide. And then they chop a big chunk of that and they grow it 4 inches wide. And they keep repeating that, and you get this consistent taper. Now, like you said, okay, from the trunk to the next taper, it's usually longer and then the shorter, shorter, shorter from there. And then you can integrate that in. What growers here seem to be doing is that they're growing trunks for that pole. Instead of cutting it very short to grow the second section of the trunk, they think that they're finished growing the trunk. So they chop it way up high and they grow a new leader thinking that's the apex. So you either have no taper change and then a sudden taper change on the top, and then they end up growing it too long, just like the base, right? It's just a repeat. And then there's your tree. Then that's okay, customer, it's time for you to buy a tree that has weird taper, sometimes no taper. Or sometimes it has taper, but the tree just naturally happened to grow taper and it just worked out. That happens too. It's not always just poles. And it seems like it's the shortfall is just a technical thing. It's just an inexperience in growing material for bonsai. Um, Now, having said that, until the demand for that kind of taper is there, and the demand for bad taper goes down, nothing's going to change, right? If I'm growing trees that have maybe not the best taper or what I consider pretty good taper, and say it's not, right? And a bunch of people buy it from me, I'm going to keep growing the same damn thing, right?
Yeah.
But if one day everybody says, no, we don't want that, I'm not going to just keep growing it. And it'll be like, oh, well, what do you want, right? Well, we want you to be able to cut it shorter and grow better taper, right? The demand is not there. And not to say that you shouldn't just buy trees because you want trees or you're like, well, this is what we got. I want something, right? That's fine. Uh, there isn't an effort to say, well, I really want that. To my knowledge, I'm not trying to offend anybody. To my knowledge, there isn't a grower that's doing that much, or there's no emphasis in that. And I can understand why, because I mean, growing takes time. to grow a trunk a certain size and then cut it, grow the next phase, it takes significantly more time than if you just grew 2 stages of taper instead of 4. It takes more time, it takes more work. And there's always the risk of, well, am I going to get my return? Right? Because you are all trying to make a buck, right? We're trying to make a living. So I understand why it's going to be hard. But I haven't seen there's some people who have grown really nice stuff for sure. But nobody, I've not. It's not been apparent to me that anybody's really just growing what was fundamentally a very basic way of growing things, right? Just grow something very big. This talking about deciduous trees, growing whatever the size is, say 8, 10 inches wide, whatever, however long that's going to take. That does take time. Chopping it really short, growing a new leader, and getting that taper. It takes more time for sure. The technical part is it's not difficult. That's the thing. It just takes time to do it. And to, hopefully, when you're growing your second stage, you don't let it go too far, and then it's as big as your first stage.
Yeah.
Then you just lost a bunch of time. So there's a bit of experience that's required. It's definitely not, I guess, anybody that grows stuff, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to grow my first batch and it's perfect. I mean, you can spend decades being the ideal grower, and then hopefully then they pass it on to the next group of growers, just like bonsai people passing bonsai to the next generation of bonsai, and they make it better and so forth. The growers have to kind of go through that same thing. Now, I don't spend a lot of time growing trees. I've seen my teacher and what they've grown in the ground. I'm not trying to say that I know everything about growing, but from what I've seen in higher quality deciduous trees and that taper change, you can see evidence of it was grown here. You can see the evidence of it got cut here, healed, it got grown here, it got cut there, it got grown there. And you can see the taper change from the very mechanical, very bonsai by numbers.
Yeah.
Step 1, step 2, step 3. Like you can see it. You don't have to be a grower to know that's what happened either, right?
For sure.
But I think the limiting factor really is time, right? Is, can you spend 15, 20, 25 years growing a tree to then sell it and then hopefully somebody buys it? Or is it an 8-year thing and then you got to make some money, right? I understand.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that we have trees that doesn't have taper. Or we don't have trees that are like, you see these trees in Japan and they're like 12 inches wide. And you're like, surely we can grow trees 12 inches wide too, but why is it not happening? Right? I know there are people who have done that with tridents and things like that. But it seems like it should be simple enough to do it with other types of trees too, but it's just not quite there. Maybe the demand isn't high enough, or there's not as many bonsai people that do it. So it's harder to do it or make a living doing it. So of course, why would somebody do it? That part I don't know. I don't.
For sure. I've got some stuff I'm growing, but for myself, or just for fun, And I guess one thing that I think about is I'm growing trees out, growing that pole, but then rather than like just cutting it to nothing and then letting something sprout out, I've got the next thing wired already. So I cut and I have something that's way thinner, but I still need to thicken that piece.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think you can do that because you're dealing, and so this becomes a just like when like kind of your average bonsai enthusiast decides to grow something in the ground, or they try to start a tree as a project, right? Is that when you get into growing, say, 10 trees, you would tend to do something like what you're doing, right? Because it takes a certain amount of time to pick those branches wired, because now you're on your knees and all that stuff, right? But let's say, for example, you're like a big time grower and you're growing 1,000 trees. Now it becomes impractical to, say, go through and try to find that branch and wire it and then remember to take the wire off and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with thousands of trees. And so they have the luxury of, well, I don't have to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and chop it, and 90% of them will grow the top that I need. 10% will not, and then I just get rid of them.
Yeah,
It's faster doing that,
for
right,
sure.
kind of thing.
For sure.
Just like when people are growing trees or they get into bonsai and they decide to grow something.
Okay, we're back.
Okay.
So we're talking about growing trees out. And
Yeah. So like what you're doing,
Yes.
growing stuff in the ground. Yeah, you can go through and do a little bit more detailed type of stuff because you can deal with like the 10 or 20 that
Mhm.
you're growing, right? Just like I am kind of curious. Like, yeah, I know you're growing umes in the
Yeah.
ground, and some of them are pretty big. The last time I was there, would you say some of them are like 8 inches wide? So
Think
even bigger?
like about that.
Yeah. So how
Like
long
the
did it
biggest
take
ones.
for you to grow that?
Well, that's like my biggest one is
Is
that
that
big.
okay? And then the other
And
ones are maybe a
the
little
other ones
smaller.
are smaller. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So say 8 to 12 inches. Let's say.
yeah. I started them from cutting.
Okay. So just a little twig.
Yep, just little twig, and that was at my last house. I've lived at my current house for 5. So maybe 10-ish years.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're growing these umes, and it's about 10 years to get that size, and it's like, and then for growing deciduous tree, I know we're just saying deciduous trees, but for trees like ume, it's a lot of time. It's not as simple as, well, I grew the trunk a certain size and then I just chop it, right? Because they
Yeah.
don't heal wounds either,
Yeah.
right? So there's challenges on different types of trees. If it's like a maple, usually you can heal wounds. Generally, that's the case. You can heal wounds, and then you can follow that step 1, step 2, step 3. For trees that don't heal wounds like umes, then it's a little bit different. Now, for the most part, nobody really cares about taper on umes that much, so you might not have to do that. It's really just size bark.
Yeah.
If the trunk is whole versus it having dead wood.
It's funny, if I could go back in time, I would not grow ume.
Yeah. Just grow a different tree.
Yeah, a
And
different
that's
type of
that's
tree.
the interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
Because now you've grown, say, a certain amount of ume.
Uh-huh.
It took 10 years so far. You're getting kind of there's a result. You're thinking about what you could have done different or what you may do different from now on. And now it's another 10 years,
Yeah,
right, to
yeah.
implement that. And
Uh-huh.
then you learn something there, and it's
Yeah.
another 10 years to implement that.
Yes, that's what
And
pisses me off about growing
yeah,
is, like, you would do a way better job now with all the knowledge that you get,
yeah,
everything that
right,
you
yeah,
messed
yeah.
up. Yeah, I guess that's bonsai in general.
That's true. That is true. So I mean, that's the difficulties in growing, right? You can. It's just like if somebody bought a vineyard,
Yeah.
or maybe not bought a vineyard, but started a vineyard and they planted grapes, and it's like, yeah, you won't really start making any wine until 15 years later because you're
Mhm.
just figuring out the process of how to grow.
Yeah. I wonder, like, for example, with you, your trident maple, right? It looks phenomenal. It's nothing's it is so, so good, right? But if you would start it now,
It would be
it
better.
might be a lit it
Oh
would be
yeah,
like a
yeah,
half better, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
And
it would be better. Yeah,
that's the truth.
yeah,
That's the truth.
yeah.
It pisses me
And
off.
well, yeah, of
Like,
course,
just
right?
everyone
Like,
off.
could have done that,
Yeah.
it could have, should have, right? All
Yeah.
those things. It is interesting because at least some of the newer trees that I'm working on, I'm implementing the things that I have learned off of that tree, and uh, and so the newer trees that I'm developing are better for that, right? It doesn't mean I'm doesn't mean my first tree is all bad or anything, but I am gonna
It's
continue
great.
rolling with it and all
It's
that.
so nice.
Okay, so I'll just say it is what it is. Okay. Um, yeah, would I have done something better with the Nabari a little bit? Yeah, I could have made it better. Could the branches be better? Yeah, absolutely. Or the branches are. It wasn't even the branches on my trident is not as good as some of the newer ones because when I was learning how to develop, I made all the mistakes on that tree, right? And once you get past a certain size on the tree, as the tree gets bigger, you don't get those branches back. You'd have to restart the tree. And I just never did that. So it's not as dense as I would normally like it. Whereas my client's tree, where I started later, is denser
Yeah.
and has more better branches, right? And so,
Can we talk about density just a little bit? I feel like that's another maybe
yeah,
pitfall in the US. I feel like a lot of people like trees that are what I would consider kind of thin. Or
yeah,
say
yeah.
if you go to Kokufu, you see the prize winning Korean hornbeam. It's crazy dense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, from what I get in Japan is for at least for deciduous trees that if you have density in the tree, it tends to help in showing that it's very old. And then that's why they do that. Not every tree is super dense, and not every tree has to be super dense to win kokufu. Uh, but it generally speaking, it tends to show more age, and they like that, right? It shows more refinement. Look at all these little branches, right? There's so many. It almost seems ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? But again, when you're looking at a giant old tree, it's not like they have only 5 branches. There's a lot of branches.
Yeah.
So many you don't try to count them anymore. You just know there's a lot.
Mm.
Right? So when you're looking at a small tree like a bonsai and it just has so many branches on it, it
Oh,
gives you a sense of like this is some old mature tree, right? It's grown that dense because that tree is so old. It's found every speck of sunlight that it can get. A branch is there to get it, right? The leaf at the end of that branch is there to get it. There's no gaps. Old trees don't have a bunch of gaps. They don't just let this sun. Oh, yeah, there's a bunch of sunlight here. We're just not going to take advantage of that. That's what young trees do. They haven't gotten there yet, right? Old trees have found every crevice of sunlight
yeah.
they can get, right? So there's these super wide, full trees, round canopies. They found it all, right? Um, Now, having said that, if you have a tree that's more spaced apart, that could be a stylistic reason, right? You're not you're showing something different. Generally, for deciduous tree, I think because we don't see a lot of really full deciduous trees, that's still kind of the favorite right now. Now, will that change if, say, we've seen so many really full trees that we actually want to see a little bit more spacing? Maybe not spacing in between the branches, but spacing in between the little branches, but maybe bigger spacing in between the bigger branches, and some bigger gaps, right? Like you think of when you see like a juniper or something. Oh,
That's interesting. We were talking about acquired tastes earlier the other day, and I wonder if density and branching, or maybe I feel that
I
density is kind of an acquired taste.
yeah, I think it's an understanding thing, right? As we all find out that at we can look at something if we don't really understand the reasoning behind it. We just kind of come up with our own reason behind it, and then we decide we like it or we don't, right? But then you get one nugget of information, and you're like, oh, that's why they did that, and maybe you have an appreciation for that, and now you change, right? And so, oh, I understand it better, right? I was just missing a piece of information that didn't allow me to maybe enjoy it for what it really is. And so I find that it's just really a misunderstanding. I think if people studied bonsai a little bit more, or studied, the reasonings why things are the way they are currently, they may actually have an appreciation for it. It is kind of funny though, because I've run into many instances where talking to people who started in bonsai, who have been doing bonsai or have been doing bonsai for a long time. Uh, Not all, but I've run into people that will look at a tree that's a certain style, say it's a Japanese tree, and they'll make certain comments. And I used to be a little bit upset at first because I was like, well, you don't even understand it, right? Now I'm not even really that upset. It's just a it just was because you don't know the reason behind it. That's all it is, right? It's not a bad thing. It's just you're just ignorant to it. Ignorant, not like a bad thing. It's just you don't know the reasoning behind it. That's all it is. And then once you explain the reason behind it, or a lot of times people reference photos and then they'll make these assumptions, and then you show them the tree in person, and then the reaction's like a total 180. Like they love this tree. I was like, it's the same tree in the photo
Yeah.
that you were saying, well, that's too full, or that's cookie cutter, right? But when the tree is 3-dimensional in person, it's like, wow, how do I get my tree to look like that? And it's like, it's the same tree,
Yeah.
right? What happened? What changed? Right? So and that's why it's important for people in bonsai you don't have to like something because the Japanese are doing or whoever's doing it, whoever says it's how you're supposed to do it. But there should be an effort in at least understanding what they're trying to do. And you may find that you actually like that.
Yeah.
Right.
like
Or you might say, okay, I see what they're trying to do, but that's just not my thing. And then you go off and you do your thing. Right. And that's perfectly acceptable. Right. There's nobody saying you can't do that. Even in Japan, nobody says you can't do that. Right. But if you want to do it, say this way, well, these are some things we tend to do. Right. You don't do some other thing and say, this is what you're doing Japanese bonsai, for example. Right. So there is a recognition, and which is funny because a lot of people don't realize that either. And it is true that a lot of people that make these assumptions, some of the people that make the biggest assumption about Japanese bonsai have never been to Japan, right? They've never seen the trees in person. I was like, you can't really make that call, right? If you've never been there or you've never really
seen them in
studied.
person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've never seen them in person, at least. I mean, and I can even argue that seeing something in person, you're just as oblivious to not seeing it in person because you don't even know what you're looking at, right? There still requires an effort to understand what you're looking at and some study. And you may be surprised in what you learn, right? And you take the good with the bad, right? Yeah, I know I don't like this kind of style, and you study it, and you have to accept the fact that, oh, maybe I do like some version of it, or maybe I really like it a lot. Or you find out, yeah, I dislike it just like I thought, right? But at least you tried to understand. At least you can respect it. Well, that is that, right? I'm doing something different. I I respect that. I appreciate that, and that's perfectly acceptable. And that's fine. It's the lack of trying to understand is really the problem sometimes.
That's a great point, and I absolutely love that. I think sometimes maybe I don't give it as much effort as I should, but I think seeking to understand is so vitally important. And I'm glad that you emphasize that. I want to think about that more.
Yeah, yeah, and we don't all have to be like perfect about it, and we have to like super study it and all that stuff. Just know that it's always kind of there. We don't have to study it day to day or anything, but just kind of keep your ears open. Maybe or at least just keep keep your mind open, right? Maybe there's something to it. I mean, there are styles that I don't like right now. I can say I don't. That's not my cup of tea, right? But I have to be real. I have to be real about it, right? I have to ask myself, well, I don't know anything about it. If I don't know anything about it, how could I possibly say I don't like it?
For sure.
Because it's just like first impression, no logic behind it. It's just purely emotion. I don't think I like that, right? But I know nothing about it. So how much can I really say that I dislike it? Maybe it's okay to say, well, I don't think I like it.
Hmm.
It's okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But until I actually really like look into it, can I really verify that, right? Or maybe there's something in part that I do like, and maybe I can incorporate that into my design, right? Which would make, I think, myself better.
Hmm.
Right? So just keeping an open mind, um, Yeah, because it gets kind of boring if you're just like studying. I'm not saying you have to do that, but just keep an open mind. You'll be surprised in what you can learn, however wacky or crazy you think something might be.
For sure.
And it could just be crazy too. That's that's
Yeah,
100% possible, right?
totally.
But you never know. You
Yeah.
just never know.
Very nice. I like it. Um, I guess I am curious. We said this term a few times, I think, so far on the podcast. But the term cookie cutter.
Mm.
Do you have general thoughts on that term?
Um, I never thought about it really in depth. Though I've heard people referencing, cookie cutter, and most of the time it is a reference to say Japanese bonsai, right? Um, Not to give it any merit in the sense that most of the people that I've heard say, "Oh yeah, it's just cookie cutter," have always seen pictures in the book. They've never
Mm.
seen the trees in person. Um, I mean, I thinking about it now. I mean, I would just break it down, right? What is the root of cookie cutter, right? Okay, we have a cookie. We're
Oh,
cutting all the cookies the same,
yeah.
right? It's just a repeat of the same. That's the exact replica of something. Um, Most of the time, I find that when somebody says something is cookie cutter, is I guess the question really is it exactly the same? It's easy to say it is the same because sometimes it doesn't require a lot of effort, right? You say, it kind of has the general shape, so it's cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Well, it has this triangular shape. Well, most bonsai have triangular shapes. We don't really say they're all cookie cutters. I mean, most trees grow triangular shape.
Yeah.
Do we say all trees are, when we
It's
walk
very
in a redwood forest, we don't say, oh, they look at cookie cutter trees.
Yeah.
These things suck. It's like, no, why is it applied now, right?
Mhm.
So if something's great and you see 10 of them, I'd like to see all 10. I wouldn't say, well, they're just cookie. Well, maybe. I don't know. Hard to say. No, I mean, so in my experience, when somebody says cookie cutter, most of the time, it's most of the time, and again, this is my experience, is most of the time, the people are saying that two things is that they're not looking deep enough into the details. They're generalizing. So yeah, all trees, all bushes are round. You can all say they're all cookie cutters, but the people who look at them a little bit more deeply is like, well, no, this one's a little bit more conical. This is a little bit more like a ball. This is a little bit, so it becomes kind of well, are you seeing kind of the small details? And that's the different thing. And in Japanese, again, Japanese aesthetics, a lot of times it can be so subtle that at first glance you might say it's cookie cutter, but if you really stop and study it, you find out that it could be very different. It's just you weren't, again, paying attention, right? Because it's the differences are so subtle, but the meaning can be so greatly different just from those small subtle things. Just like, I mean, for all of us, right now is repotting season, right? We've all experienced this, right? You're putting a tree in a pot. You're looking at the front. And you're saying, oh, okay, I want this to be my front. This is where it's going to be positioned in the pot. You're looking at, okay, great. You turn it 5 degrees, and the tree somehow is so much better from such a little change. Now, at first glance, if somebody's new, they might not see the difference, right? But because you know a little bit more about bonsai, it made the biggest difference.
Yeah.
The tree went from okay to great just from that little change, whatever the characteristics that you shown up because you changed at 5 degrees. It wasn't 180 degrees, right? That's really different. Everybody sees that. But very few people see the 5 degree change and why that's so much better. It requires a lot more uh, experience or understanding of bonsai or the little things that you see that changes that makes everything so much better. So yeah, the interesting thing is I've not heard cookie cutter in a while, but I think that's only because I don't work with as many people as I used to. Also, I think, or I don't work with as many newer people, or maybe I've worked with, or I'm working with people who maybe have a little bit better understanding of, well, that's just a little too general. Nothing's ever really that simple. Uh, that it's actually rare that things are just cookie cutter in art,
Yeah.
right? When you get into that. And that's not a concept that is, it, I don't know how I would place it, but I do think that people who have appreciation for art rarely will say that anymore. Because they
Yeah.
know there's so many variables in it that seems too generalized.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you paint. Well, that other person paints. You guys paint the same. We're using the same. It's like, no, that's not
Yeah.
how that works, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's really cool that you studied at Aichian under Mr. Tanaka, as I think he has some trees that are extremely high level, but the polar opposite of cutter and kind of crazy to some people.
Yeah. Yeah. I do appreciate that, right? That is studying there and understanding kind of the family philosophy is they weren't afraid to have things that were different. And that goes against what most people think. When you go to Japan and they're going to be very rigid about things, and in some cases, yeah, they're very rigid about a lot of things, right? But you find out that, well, it's actually it's not that crazy rigid, right? There are people who are experimenting and trying things, and uh,
Like Mr. Tanaka.
yeah, and his
Yes.
father and his great grand and his grandfather and so forth, right? That they did try to do things a little different, and that's they weren't all successes, right? But there was some that did succeed, and so I do give him credit because it helped shape how I kind of view bonsai, because I do like what I mean, air quotes, right? Classic Japanese style aesthetic bonsai, right? And I do like that. And that does change over time. If you look at old kokufu books versus modern kokufu books, it did change. It's not like it stayed the same for 100 years.
For sure.
It definitely has changed. And there's styles that pop up and styles that go away, styles that stay. Things get cleaner, more refined, and so forth. Oh, but yeah, I did appreciate it, and I don't know if it's a Western influence or it's just I don't know. I can't say for sure, but yeah, they definitely appreciated kind of the funkiness in some trees, and it was always, and which is why I say this, it was always related to age. Like it was kind of like, it is a little funky, but the tree's so old, you just got to roll with it. You have to accept it for what it is, which is kind of just a bigger philosophy of life, right? Than just some trees we're working with, right? It's just too old to mess with. You just got to respect that, right? And so you just kind of appreciate it for what it is at that point. So you get kind of these unorthodox kind of style, or what you would think is not classic style, right? And it ends up being really nice because it does kind of fit in some other aesthetics that they appreciate. It might just not be all of it, but it hits some of those key points, right? Like age, uh, longevity, uh, kind of different, but not like wacky different, but it's like tasteful different.
Yeah.
There's that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen on every tree, but on some trees, it just kind of works out, and you have to you have to recognize that, and then and show that off. You don't hide it. try to change it to conform into some rigid set. And that was one of the most interesting things about going to Japan and doing an apprenticeship, is that when I was studying bonsai here, I actually got very rigid on what was the so-called rules. And when I went to Japan, I became less rigid in bonsai, which is the complete opposite of what most people thought would happen.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, bonsai became much more freer when I went to Japan to study it, right, than before. So maybe what I'm saying is that if you want to understand bonsai a little bit better, you should go to Japan and check it out at least, right? You go to 100 Kokufu, right? It's coming around. You can still book your flights. Flights are not that expensive. February is not a busy tourist season in Tokyo. It's also the coldest month in Tokyo, but it's not that bad a cold.
Bring some warm clothes.
Yeah, just bring some more. If you're from the Midwest, it's going to be, you're wearing shorts.
Yeah.
All right, no problem.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I think my phone is about to die.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
Uh, one thing that I was curious about is, it seems like with conifer bonsai, the goal is to make a tree look as ancient as possible,
Okay.
or very close to, like very, very old, as in it grows very old in nature.
Yeah.
Whereas with deciduous, it still make the tree look very, very old, but maybe not as far of an age as with conifer.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think that statement generally is semi true, right? Can a Japanese maple ever look as old as a really old black pine? Would they ever show the same age? I mean, I'd have to think about it, but my initial reaction is no. They don't show the same age, because if we're looking at it from a naturalistic standpoint, is that deciduous trees just don't stay. They're not actually that old, right? Well,
Relative to conifer.
like you never see a Japanese maple that's 300 years old. There's no such thing.
Is there not 300?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Or at least, or let's just say, okay, you don't see a Japanese maple that's 500 years
Yeah, okay.
old, right? Just like here for us, it's pretty rare that an oak tree is 150 years old. That's like pretty old. 300 years old? I don't think that really happens. Is there such thing?
I have no idea on the
Yeah.
age of oak trees.
Okay, yeah. So anyway,
I
so
wonder. I'm not sure.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I get where you're at. Whereas Sierra junipers, I know that they can get into the thousands.
They can get into
right?
the thousands. Black pines can be 300 years old. Japanese maples, I don't think so. So yeah, that's a very interesting point. Is if we're looking at an age thing, can we ever make a Japanese maple look as old as a black pine? My initial reaction is no, because they never really are that old relative to like a black pine. I mean, if you're just searching for a tree that is like the oldest possible, then you might as well just go with all junipers, because they're going to be the oldest stuff you can find for the most
Or
part.
bristlecone
Or
pines.
Brazil
but-
pine, yeah,
yeah.
right. But so yeah, you style a juniper or black pine to make them look old. There's a certain kind of look to that kind of age, where yeah, we don't tend to apply those things to a maple. Maybe because it's just not really required, because they don't really get that old.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something to really think about. But yeah, my initial kind of gut reaction to that is yeah, they don't, because they don't technically, naturalistically get that old anyways. So we show what is considered old for that type of tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
still a very mature, old Japanese maple. It's just not
Just relative
super
to
age-
itself. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Relative to other trees, it's just a different tree, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe we shouldn't try to make them look the same age either, right? Yeah. What does a 500-year-old Japanese maple look like? Nobody knows because
Maybe
there's no
dead.
such thing. Yeah, it'd be just it's dust, right? But maybe we have an idea what a 100-year-old one looks like,
Yeah.
and that's considered old, and maybe they don't last much longer than that. I think Japanese maple, I think it's somewhere like 80, 100 years or something, they say.
Okay.
I mean, in bonsai form, it could last longer
Yeah.
just because of the care that we give them. But there's a natural, it'll be something I Google.
Yeah.
How long does a Japanese maple live?
Yeah.
But yeah, they definitely don't live like 1,000 years, like a juniper.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So,
Awesome. Well, hey, it's been extremely fun chatting with you.
yeah.
This
Same as
theater-
always.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there's probably nothing I'd rather be doing right now.
Okay. Oh,
I
cool.
love
Thanks.
hanging out with you,
Thanks.
chatting bonsai. It's super fun for me. And doing all this bonsai work we've been doing together has just been absolutely so much fun for me.
Oh, great. Great. I'm glad. I'm
Yeah.
glad. Yeah, it's fun for me too. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, really appreciate the time. And I hope I can get you on, convince you to be on another episode.
okay. Yeah. It sounds good. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thanks, Peter.